I knew something was off the second I turned on the tap and nothing came out. I twisted it again. Nothing. I checked the bathroom. Same. Then my phone rang. It was a voicemail from Gretchen Albright, president of the Willow Creek HOA and reigning queen of petty tyranny. Hello, Mr. Harlan Zeke. This is Gretchen from the HOA. We've noticed your quarterly HOA fee was 5 days late. As per subsection 8, paragraph 3 of our charter, this grants us the right to suspend non-essential utilities until payment is received in full. Water may not be essential for everyone, but our lawyer agrees it qualifies. Thank you. I stood in my kitchen, jaw clenched, staring at the sink like it had betrayed me. I wasn't behind on payments. I'd sent the damn check 2 weeks ago. But if there's one thing Gretchen loves more than her yapping Pomeranian, it's making people grovel. I stormed into the HOA office the next morning, where Gretchen sat sipping lemon water like a smug queen on her plastic throne. You cut my water off for a payment that wasn't even late, I said, slamming a copy of my cleared check onto the counter. She didn't even flinch. Actually, Mr. Zeke, we didn't receive the payment until Tuesday. Mail timing isn't our problem. You can't just shut off someone's water. Oh, we can, it's in the bylaws. I stared her down. You're messing with the wrong guy. She gave a dry chuckle. We'll see. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because of the water, it was the principle. Gretchen had been pulling this crap for years. Fining people for leaving garbage cans out 5 minutes too long. Sending threatening letters over lawn lengths. And now, weaponizing utilities. I wasn't going to be another name on her list. I drove out to the county records office the next day just to see who actually controlled the water supply into Willow Creek. I expected it to be the city. It wasn't. Turns out, decades ago when the neighborhood was built, the developer struck a private deal with a now-defunct water company. Ownership of the primary reservoir outside town had quietly reverted to a private trust after that company folded one that was up for sale. And that trust, it was now auctioning off its assets. I stared at the listing. The reservoir, the filtration system. The entire grid that serviced 5 HOAs, including Willow Creek. I made one call. By the following week, I owned it. I didn't say a word to anyone. I just waited. And then, one sunny Thursday morning, I flipped a switch at the main control board, the HOA office. Gretchen's house. Every smug board member who backed her up, bone dry. The calls started about 30 minutes later, first from the HOA office, then from board member Cheryl, then Gretchen herself. I didn't answer. But I did drive slowly past Gretchen's place that afternoon, just in time to see her out front, shouting into her phone as her garden hose sputtered and died. I gave her a friendly wave. She didn't wave back. By Friday morning, Gretchen cracked. I was up early changing a fuel filter in my garage when I caught her pacing up and down the sidewalk across from my house, phone clutched tight, her neat bun unraveling in the wind. She'd been trying to keep up appearances, but the brittle poise had finally snapped. She didn't see me at first. I let her stew for a while before stepping out and wiping my hands on a rag. You lost, I asked casually. She spun around like a coiled spring had just been released. You think this is funny? Her voice was hoarse. You turned off water to an entire neighborhood. I didn't turn off anything. I just stopped providing a service to an account that's been delinquent. You know, like you said about my house. She fumbled for words, mouth working but nothing coming out. I'm sure you understand, I added, tossing the rag over my shoulder. Mail timing isn't my problem. She stormed up my driveway, her heels clacking like gunfire. You're holding an entire community hostage over a petty grudge. Correction, I said, walking past her toward my porch. You cut off my water over a late check that wasn't even late. I followed your logic, just scaled it. You'll regret this, she snapped. I already regret investing in a neighborhood run like a banana republic, I replied, but I'm making the most of it. That afternoon, the board held an emergency session in the clubhouse. It was supposed to be private, but I had a friend who lived across the street from the building and happened to own a parabolic microphone. Retired sound engineer, real hobbyist. I brought beer, he brought the gear. The board was in full meltdown. We can't let him get away with this. We need leverage, Cheryl's voice panicked. We could find him again, someone muttered. Don't be stupid, came a deeper voice. Tom, the treasurer. He's probably got lawyers lined up. He bought a utility company, for God's sake. Then Gretchen, quieter, there's another option. The maintenance fund, long silence. You're not serious, Cheryl whispered. We use it to settle debts, Gretchen replied. We just reclassify the water payment as a maintenance emergency. We pay him from the fund, then raise dues to make it back. You want to embezzle from the reserve account. It's not embezzlement if it's reallocation. Besides, we'll add a clause next quarter, retroactive authority. There was some grumbling, then reluctant agreement. I leaned back in the lawn chair, beer halfway to my lips. You get all that? I asked. My neighbor nodded, adjusting the headphones. Every word. I spent the weekend drafting a formal complaint to the state's HOA Oversight Committee and attached the full transcript with timestamps. I added a notarized copy of the original check, the bank processing confirmation, and photographs of the reservoir's deed transfer. Then I sent a copy to every homeowner in Willow Creek with a simple note. You deserve to know what your dues are funding. By Monday morning, it was war. The residents were livid. Dozens of them gathered in front of the clubhouse, waving the letter and demanding answers. Gretchen tried to calm them from the steps, but the crowd wasn't having it. You're using our dues to pay off your mess, a veteran named Carl shouted. Aren't you the one who said personal issues don't justify fund reallocation? Called a nurse from the cul-de-sac. You fine me for using the pool heater during the winter. People brought out lawn chairs. Someone set up a portable speaker and started playing protest songs. A local reporter showed up just before noon, interviewing residents who hadn't had water for 4 days. I watched from my porch, sipping iced tea. That afternoon, a black SUV pulled onto my driveway. A tall man in a state-issued windbreaker stepped out and flashed credentials. Mr. Zeke. I'm Agent Rivas with the State Property and HOA Regulation Commission. We've received multiple reports regarding HOA fund misuse and utility coercion. I invited him in and showed him everything: emails, recordings, financial reports I'd obtained through a records request. He asked sharp questions, took careful notes, and left with a USB drive full of documentation. An hour later, a second car pulled up. This one bore the county sheriff's emblem. They didn't come to see me. I watched as 2 deputies walked straight into the clubhouse and emerged 10 minutes later with Gretchen in cuffs. Cheryl followed soon after, face pale as chalk. Residents clapped. Some filmed. One guy popped open a can of soda like it was a movie premiere. 3 days later, the interim board held a public forum. They laid everything bare: how Gretchen had been siphoning funds into special projects, how she manipulated the bylaw updates to centralize power, how she'd personally authorized the water shutoff without a vote. The crowd voted unanimously to dissolve the old charter and form a new board with open elections. I declined to run, but I did help draft the new bylaws, ensuring no board could ever again control utilities or reallocate funds without full membership approval. The water was restored across the neighborhood the next morning. By the end of the week, Gretchen's house had a for sale sign in the yard. I passed by it on a walk with my dog, and for the first time in months the neighborhood felt honest. People waved. Someone offered me a cookie from a bake sale stand. Kids were riding bikes without being scolded for congregating in common areas. I didn't buy the reservoir to be a hero. I did it because I was tired of being pushed around, but in the end, it did more than fix a broken tap. It drained the poison right out of the system. And I'll tell you what, nothing tastes better than cold tea poured from a faucet you own yourself. By the following weekend, the neighborhood was still buzzing, not from chaos anymore, from relief. Willow Creek had always looked pristine from the outside, but now people were finally starting to talk to each other like neighbors instead of tenants reporting to a monarch. For the first time in years, porch lights stayed on past sunset, and nobody was worried about getting a citation for having the wrong shade of mulch. I was in the garage rewiring my workbench light when a knock came at the side door, not the front. I opened it to see Alan Stephenson, the new interim board president. He wore an old tool belt and had oil stains on his shirt, a far cry from the starch and blazer types that used to run the place. "I'm not interrupting, am I?" he asked, glancing at the soldering iron still hot on the bench. "Not unless you're here to shut off my electricity too," he chuckled and stepped inside. "Actually, I came to ask if you'd take a look at the HOA's old records. We pulled everything out of the storage unit, and there's stuff in there that makes my head spin." I leaned on the bench. "What kind of stuff?" "Financial statements going back 15 years. Some folders are missing, others are duplicated except the numbers don't match. Plus, there are these, let's call them odd payments." He handed me a photocopy. It was a ledger page with a payment labeled Consultation Services made to a company called Birchfield Strategies LLC. I'd never heard of it. $2,000 a month every month, Alan said. No contract, no description, just a check. Always signed off by Gretchen. "Where's the company based?" He pulled out his phone and tapped for a minute before handing it to me. The address listed for Birchfield Strategies was a P.O. box in another county. No website, no phone. "Looks fake," I said. "Or it's laundering." He looked at me closely, like he was deciding whether to say more. Then he did. We also found some correspondence between Gretchen and a guy named Richard Cullen. He used to be on the zoning commission until he got pushed out 2 years ago. Turns out he was quietly consulting for several HOAs in the region, including ours. For what? That's the thing. The emails are vague. They mention boundary adjustments, easement redefinitions, and one that just says we can't wait for the city to catch up. Proceed. That one's dated 3 days before the HOA annexed 5 properties on the West End. I folded my arms. Those annexations were never voted on. Alan nodded. Exactly. I think Gretchen and her crew were using fake legal advice to justify land grabs. And if Birchfield Strategies is tied to Cullen, we're looking at something worse than just corruption. How far back does it go? He rubbed his eyes. Too far, but I've got a contact at the state attorney's office. She's agreed to take a look quietly for now. I agreed to help. Not because I wanted to be involved with HOA politics, but because someone had to finish what had been started. The water conflict was just the tip of the iceberg. We spent the next week combing through digital backups, physical files, and scanned emails pulled from old board members' abandoned inboxes. It was like walking through a maze of lies held together with duct tape and arrogance. One file stood out. It was an internal memo labeled Priority Adjustments Willow Creek Expansion Plan. It listed 5 parcels of land marked for strategic reassignment, all of which had been absorbed under the HOA's jurisdiction over the past 3 years without recorded public hearings or resident votes. I cross-referenced the lot numbers with the county's plat maps. 2 of those parcels were still legally owned by private citizens who'd never sold or transferred their property. "They forged transfers," I told Alan, stunned. He paled. "That's felony-level fraud. We compiled everything into a secure digital folder, encrypted it, and sent it to the state attorney's office." Alan's contact responded within hours, asking for originals and providing a case reference number. That night, I got an unexpected call from a blocked number. "Mr. Zeke," the voice was crisp, professional, female. "This is Ada Maya Verla. I'm overseeing the preliminary investigation into Willow Creek's HOA. I've reviewed the files you submitted. I need to ask, how did you obtain the audio recordings from the board meeting? They were recorded from across the street. The meeting was loud and the window was open. Was the equipment placed on HOA property? No, my buddy's front lawn," she paused. "Then it's admissible, thank you." That recording may be critical. Over the next week, things escalated fast. The ADA filed a formal inquiry into the HOA's financial practices, and subpoenas were issued for all current and former board members. Gretchen, still out on bail for misappropriation of funds, now faced investigation for property theft and document forgery. Her lawyer tried to claim she'd been acting on legal guidance from Cullen, but Cullen was nowhere to be found. Then something unexpected happened. A quiet, soft-spoken man named Javier Morales stepped forward. He ran a landscaping business and had done work for several HOAs in the area. He testified under oath that Cullen had offered him cash to falsify records of where he'd worked and when. He wanted me to say I'd been maintaining those annexed properties since 2019. even though I never touched them until this year," Javier said during a deposition. He said it was just paperwork, but I knew something wasn't right. The ADA office issued a warrant for Cullen's arrest. He was picked up in a hotel room 2 counties over, using an alias. They found burner phones, a laptop full of HOA correspondence, and a list of properties flagged for future acquisition. The charges piled up fast: conspiracy to commit fraud, falsifying documents, aiding in theft by deception. Gretchen's bail was revoked, and she was remanded into custody. And just like that, the carefully constructed empire of control, manipulation, and legal smokescreens crumbled. A month later, the Willow Creek HOA held its first open election under the revised charter. Every position had multiple candidates, and every vote was public. The new board included a retired fireman, 2 teachers, a contractor, and a single mom who'd organized a petition drive during the water crisis. People started planting flowers that weren't regulation approved. No one stopped them. An old man down the block rebuilt his shed without submitting a request. The only thing anyone said was, "Looks great, George." I kept the reservoir, not out of spite anymore, but as a safeguard. The neighborhood now had a contract with my company, transparent, at cost, and renewable every 2 years via member vote. Alan stopped by one afternoon with 2 folding chairs and a 6-pack. We sat in the driveway, watching kids ride scooters while wind rustled through freshly planted trees. "You think it's over?" he asked. I took a sip and nodded toward the street. "Look at them, we took back our neighborhood, that's not going anywhere." He raised his bottle. "To the end of tyrants," I raised mine. "And to never paying a late fee with your faucet again." 2 weeks after the community elections, the new board held its first public planning session in the old clubhouse. The room still smelled faintly of lavender air freshener and stale policy documents, but the atmosphere had shifted. Tables were rearranged into a circle instead of the rigid lecture-style formation Gretchen used to favor. No one sat higher than anyone else. Alan waved me in and gestured to an open seat beside him. "You're going to want to hear this," he said quietly. Across the circle sat a woman I hadn't seen before. Late 30s, sharp blazer over a faded T-shirt that reads "Streets Not Sweets." She introduced herself as Camille Dorsey, investigator with the Office of Municipal Oversight. Her badge was clipped to her hip, but she didn't flash it around. "I'm here because the state attorney's office forwarded your documents," she began. "It's rare we get a case this complete. Normally, we're piecing things together from scraps. You gift-wrapped a fraud ring." Chairs creaked as people shifted. The weight of what she was saying hadn't fully settled yet. Camille placed a thick folder on the table and opened it. "However, there's one piece you didn't find. It's not a criticism. Gretchen went to great lengths to bury it. But during a seizure of Cullen's devices, we recovered an encrypted backup drive. On it were communications between Cullen, Gretchen, and a man named Henry Dalton." Alan leaned forward. "Name doesn't ring a bell." "It wouldn't," Camille said. "Dalton isn't local. He's a property developer based out of Centerville. He's also on a state watch list for aggressive land acquisition tactics, buying distressed properties through legal loopholes, then flipping them under shell corporations." She flipped a page and turned it toward the table. It showed a map of Willow Creek and 3 adjacent neighborhoods, each outlined in red. According to the emails, the HOA's previous leadership was working with Dalton to push property values down in targeted zones. They issued excessive fines, created maintenance violations out of thin air, and made life difficult enough to drive out owners. Once they moved, Dalton's agents would swoop in and buy the homes at a fraction of their worth. A cold silence gripped the room. "Gretchen wasn't just power-hungry," Camille continued. "She was part of an organized real estate laundering scheme." One of the board members, a quiet woman named Dana, raised her hand weakly. "My neighbors left 2 years ago, said they couldn't take the harassment anymore. Their house sold in under a week to a company. I thought it was just coincidence." Camille nodded. "That company, it's owned by a trust linked to Dalton. We've traced at least 7 homes in Willow Creek that followed the same pattern. Across the county, there are dozens." Alan asked, "Why would Cullen go along with this?" He was paid handsomely to falsify zoning reports and create fake easement restrictions. That's how they reclassified certain areas as common use adjacent, which is how Gretchen justified annexing them under HOA control. Camille flipped another page. This time, it was a screenshot of a wire transfer. Dalton funneled over $100,000 through Birchfield Strategies in less than 12 months. Cullen and Gretchen each got a cut. I leaned in. So what now? We've already arrested Cullen and Gretchen. Dalton is next. His accounts have been frozen as of this morning, and we've issued a federal warrant. He won't make it far. Dana looked visibly shaken. Can any of this be reversed? The property seizures, the lost homes? Camille nodded. Partially. We're working with the county recorder's office to void the fraudulent annexations and restore titles where possible. Some properties have passed through too many hands, but restitution funds are being set aside for those affected. Another board member, a retired teacher named Morris, asked, "What about us? This board? Is the HOA going to be dissolved?" Camille closed the folder gently. That's up to the residents. But I'll say this: if you keep operating transparently and within state guidelines, there's no reason it can't survive. The law doesn't hate HOAs. It hates what yours was turned into. The meeting ended with no vote, no declarations, just quiet reflection. People lingered in the parking lot afterward, talking in low voices, some shaking their heads, others just staring at the ground. As I walked to my truck, Alan jogged up beside me. "You coming to the cleanup this weekend?" "What cleanup?" "We're tearing down the old privacy fence around the board office. The new board agreed it sends the wrong message." I laughed. "You mean the fence Gretchen had installed to keep residents from loitering?" "Exactly." Turns out fences don't make good neighbors. Saturday morning, half the community showed up. Retirees with tool belts, teens with crowbars, even some of the younger families who'd mostly kept to themselves before. The fence came down in under 2 hours. People cheered when the last panel fell. Someone brought out a smoker and started barbecuing. Others set up card tables with lemonade and snacks. The old clubhouse windows were flung wide open, and the sound of kids laughing for once didn't prompt a single complaint. I was tightening a bolt on the smoker's leg when Dana walked over holding a plastic folder. This was in a box labeled miscellaneous. Thought you'd want to see it. Inside were old letters from residents who'd moved away, some angry, some heartbroken. One stood out. It was dated 5 years earlier and written by a woman named Evangeline Marks. She wrote about how the HOA had fined her for repainting her shutters without approval, even though she'd used the exact same color. When she protested, they claimed it was a different finish. They fined her again for unapproved finish variants. Eventually, she sold the house. "I loved that home," the letter read, "but it stopped loving me back. I hope someday it will again." I folded the letter carefully and handed it back. "We're getting there," I said. Over the next month, the community transformed. The new board established open office hours and created a digital suggestion portal. Residents voted to suspend all fines for minor landscaping and aesthetic issues, while the updated code was being rewritten by a committee of volunteers. A local artist painted a mural on the newly exposed clubhouse wall, bright colors and abstract shapes that made the building feel alive. Nobody asked for approval. Nobody needed to. I kept my role quiet, but people knew. They waved when I walked my dog. Someone left a thank you card in my mailbox with a drawing of a faucet and the words, "You turned more than water back on." Then, one evening, Camille called. Dalton was arrested at a private airstrip trying to board a jet under a false identity. He's facing multiple federal charges. "The case is moving fast. You'll be called as a witness, but the evidence is overwhelming." "Good," I said. "Let him sweat." "He will," she replied. "And thanks again. Most people just complain." "You acted." I hung up and sat outside as the sun dipped below the rooftops, casting long shadows over the street. The same street that once felt like a prison now just looked like home. The reservoir remained under my ownership, but I established a binding community trust that guaranteed access and maintenance at no profit. The board signed it unanimously. Water, it turns out, is a powerful thing. Not just because it runs through pipes, but because it reminds people they have a right to breathe, to live without fear, to open their doors and know they're part of something decent. The HOA tried to drown that out once. We turned the taps back on. And this time, we made sure the pipes ran clear.